For those of you that I don't know, my name is Andrea Hansen, and I am the KDA Creative Core Program Director and the Executive Director of Kern Dance Alliance. So happy that so many of you are here with us today. So today is going to be twofold. First, you're going to hear from David Milazzo, who is the KDA IT Director, and he's going to be showing you the nuts and the bolts of the technical side of our program. He'll be walking you through navigating the letter of intent and the grant portal software. He will be providing you with tips and tricks to understand technology while also keeping you safe and secure on the web. Then I will take the reins and I will guide you through crafting your KDA proposal. Today's presentation is accompanied by our ASL services from our friend Alex. Thank you, Alex, for being here. Also, the webinar will be posted later today for you to access on demand, and it will be accompanied with Spanish subtitles. We have Whitney Pasquale with us here today, the KDA program coordinator. She's going to be helping us moderate the Q&A and the chat. So we have certain times rolled in today where we're going to be taking your questions and answering them. So as we go along, as we move along through this process, please drop your questions into the Q&A or into the chat. And Whitney will be there to grab those for you and then help us moderate them at the time of the questions. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce to you David Milazzo, the KDA Creative Core IT Director.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Andrea. Pleased to be here and pleased to be a little bit of your guide through the technology that we've got in place for you to join this grants program. There's three main pieces we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to start a screen share here just in a second. And we're going to dive into the website where there is a great deal of information for you. Then the letter of intent, Google form, and then finally the grants portal. Now, the fact that you're here says that you've got some tech savvy already, so you're in pretty good shape. And you may know a lot of the things that I'm going to cover. So this could be kind of double information for some of you, but I'm hoping that I've got at least a tidbit or two for you throughout the process. So I'm going to start a screen share and dive right in here. All right, I'm sure all of you are very aware of the KDA Creative Core website and have had a chance to take a spin through it. One of the main items that is here for your review is the grant guidelines. And this button here will download those grant guidelines. And this will open up a PDF file with all the information that you will need, not only about KDA Creative Core and Kern Dance Alliance themselves, but all of the information that you're going to need to prepare to submit your information for both the letter of intent or the LOI, as well as the grants portal. Now, the LOI and the grants portal have two different qualities to them. The LOI is a one-time pass-through, meaning you have to start and finish in the same time frame. So you can't save your work. But in the grants portal, you can. So you get a little bit more ability to plan and craft in the grants portal, sort of in the second step. But in both, what we would recommend is you build all of your answers in some other application, a notes application, or Microsoft Word, Apple Pages, Google, Google Docs, in any other kind of place where you can plan your work and edit it and get it ready. And then it becomes so easy to get your data into these platforms by just copying and pasting. So you can go through all of the questions here from the program goals, make sure you're eligible, figure out where you're going to make impact with your project. And this is going to be an important piece. Whether you're an individual artist or an organization, some of the content that you have to submit is different. So make sure you know how you're coming in to the grants portal and the LOI, so you have the right information ready to go. So again, make sure you peruse this entire PDF. All of the information is there. All of these questions are merely duplicated when you get to the actual portals themselves. So the first step is to submit an LOI, and this button in the upper right-hand corner, or this button here, there are buttons all over the place to make sure you can find the LOI. You can also go through our navigation, which you notice at the top, our requirements, which a lot of this is the same data you'll find in that PDF, but it's here on the web for you as well. Resources, access to the webinars, but hey, you guys already know that, right? The timeline, important to know what signposts are happening when, make sure you're ready for all the deadlines. And lastly, some stories giving you some information about how we're being seen in the media. So submit an LOI. This is going to take you into a Google form. And this Google form will require you to have a Gmail account. Here's mine here, david.milazzo@gmail.com. So you'll just need to have a general Gmail account of any sort, and that will allow you to hit the next button and proceed into the questions. Here we have that question by an artist or nonprofit. I'll say an individual artist for now. And here's where we begin adding all of our answers. So I'm just going to give a quick fill in here. How about 123 Bob Street? And you'll notice it's going to force you to answer all of these questions. Anything with an asterisk is required. So if you don't have any social or websites, you don't have to enter them, but I would assume that you have at least one. And here's where we begin asking some questions about the time in which you've been participating in these services. And there's a handful more. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can work your way through. They match everything you'll find in the guidelines. And in the end, you'll submit. But the most important thing to understand is I can't save this in progress. So you have to start and end in one session. And in the end, you'll submit the form. At that point, we'll begin reviewing these LOI submissions. And once we have reviewed them and see that you are prepared and ready to go to the next step, you will receive a welcome email to our grants portal. So I'm going to close out of these environments here and move over to our grants portal. So you will be sent an email to the email address that you include in the LOI, and that will send you a link to reset your password. So note about passwords, longer is better than shorter, and it doesn't have to be crazy complex, but somewhere between 8 and 14 characters, but use a good password. And don't make it password if you can help it. So once you put in, you make the update to your password, you will be able to log in here. I've got a little account called testing@creativecore.org, and there's my saved password, and I'm going to log in. Now I've begun my process here, so I see in progress. The first time you come in, you'll only see a 1 on funding opportunities. And so you'll click the 1 there. Now I've already started my application, so this button is gray, so it's not going to let me start a second application. But you, if you haven't come into the portal before, will see a nice button there, just begin your application. And it gives you some information here, all that matches the other documents you've seen about when the LOI deadline occurs, as well as the application deadline. So I'm going to use the back button and go to my in progress. And now I see my submission that is in progress, and I can open that. And I'm looking now at the application summary. Here's some information I added about my address. If I had my socials, they would all be sitting here. So there's a few things that I've not filled out here, so it's a little thin, but you get the idea, all of the information that I filled out in the contact. Now, if I go to my application, this is the bread and butter. This is where you're going to cut and paste from all of your word processing document, your name, your summary. You notice there's a little word counter down here. And it will start counting down as you put in your words. So if you paste in something that's too big, this is going to turn red and show you how many words you need to subtract to match that goal of the word count. These are simply some check buttons. And you can have multiple. So if you're doing musical and theater and visual arts all together, certainly tag all of the ways you're going to make an impact with your artistic focus. Program focus, program description. Again, cut and paste your content. You'll notice there's a little kind of triangle grippy bar down here. This allows you to drag these larger to make sure you can see all the content that you're submitting. Most of these fields are really identical. Each have their own word count, but they're all scalable. And this is something I want to draw your attention to, which is our budget. So I've made some edits to the budget, which is why you see it here, but until you've done that, it will be blank. So we're looking for a little bit of information about your revenue as well as your expenses. I also like to draw your attention to a mistake that we have made here. At the moment, our revenue and expenses are adding up to our total surplus, and that is not how this is supposed to work. The revenue should then subtract your expenses, and this should be a subtraction. So don't worry about this at the moment. Ignore the addition that's happening. We're going to fix this on the back side today or tomorrow. All of your entries, these fields here and these fields here, the places where you enter your data, that doesn't change. We're just going to change our math so it makes the total surplus at the end match up properly. Now, at any point, you're halfway through this and you've submitted some, you can save the draft. And we highly recommend that you do this. You kind of have one shot to submit, but you have hundreds of shots to craft this and get it just perfect before you submit it to our team. So at any point, you can save draft, and it's going to capture all of that. And you're free then to just leave the website behind. I can just close the window. I'm going to leave the page, and I'm out. I've got the link to this page here on my desktop. If I open it back up again, it was so few moments since I logged out that it didn't require me to log back in. I hit in progress and open, and I'm right back where I was in the application editing. So take your time, make this perfect and beautiful. And the last part down here is some of the documents that we're going to require you to upload. So after you've put in all the different blurbs, we've got some video links. So if you're hosting on Vimeo or a protected site where the video content is behind a password wall of some sort, if you'll first put your URL, whatever that URL might be, and then if there's a password required for it. Not password, I hope. And then following those links, we have some uploads. So here is a work sample upload, and we use this little arrow up button to do that. Once we choose this, we get our file manager window. And this can work two ways. I'm going to slide my browser window over a bit just to demonstrate. So I have our guidelines PDF here, and I'm going to drag that over the top of this folder or this window here, and you see how it kind of turns blue. So it just uploaded my PDF. And now put that in the file list. So we can allow you to upload Word documents, PDFs, images in the JPEG or PNG format, or audio files in the MP3 format. You notice no video is here. Video are typically very large files. So that's why up above you saw all those video slots where you can provide links to posted video on video sites. So you can continue adding by dragging and dropping, or you can also choose this browse button over on the left. Browse will open up a browsing window, and I can find what elements I want to upload. This is the wrong file type. Let's see if it'll even accept it. No, it will not. So you get a pretty good feedback there that file formats that it doesn't want, it will not let you upload. But I bet I can give it two of the same thing. Oh yeah, it'll do that. So here comes my second grant guidelines just to come up the works, but you get the idea. And as these add, they will all stack below. Hey, look at that. It's smarter than I thought. That was a live demo for myself there. It's smart enough to know not to duplicate items. So as you add different files, they will all stack down here. I can close the window and we'll find them here. If for some reason I want to change these documents, the 3 dots on the side, this is a common element that allows me to either rename this file or delete the file and start over. I can also look at these in 2 different ways, in more of a grid view or a list view. And so once you have all of your documents, your video links, your budget, all of your content that you pasted in from your word processor, once all of this is complete, slide down to the very bottom, and also use these little hot buttons on the right to get there. You'll be certifying that this is all true and correct. Your name and the date, and that will allow you to do your final submission. But again, at any point, you can save the draft and wait to submit towards the end of the filing period. There's no rush before the filing period. Early applications don't get any more weight or value than ones that come in 5 minutes before the deadline. So take all the time you need to get your content as perfect as you can. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Whitney to provide any questions for me. So please let her rip. Before that, let me mention, both Andrea and I will be setting up office hours. I believe Andrea's Wednesdays between 11 and 12. Myself, I'm going to be on Fridays between 3 and 4. We'll have links on the website, and let me show you where that is likely going to live. So if you scroll to the bottom to meet our team, you'll find Andrea, myself, and Whitney. And my expectation is we're going to have buttons here that will provide office hours. And that's going to take you to a Calendly website where you can pick a 15-minute session one-on-one with Andrea or myself to either talk about a technical problem that you're having or a more content problem that you have a question about. And we'll be doing that for the next 6-7 weeks before the grants deadline of April 1st. So we're here to help. We ask that you take advantage of any of the help that we offer, just so you get yourselves in the best position to be a part of this grants process. So with that, let me hand it to Whitney and see if she has any questions.
Yes, we have a lot of good questions already. I am receiving all of your questions. Just a reminder, please type your questions into the Q&A icon that's located on the bottom of your screen. Rather than using the chat, we want to leave the chat open just for us to provide you with additional links and resources that you can view as we're going through our presentation today. Andrea, I have a lot of questions about the revenue and expenses portion. Is that something that will be addressed specifically in a later webinar, or should those questions be addressed right now?
Great question, Whitney. So if you are a nonprofit organization, you will be supplying a 2-year budget snapshot of your organization. You are finding that information in your 990s. So if you've filed your taxes between 2020 and 2022, you will have 2 years of revenue. You will simply pull out your expenses and your revenues that is found directly in your 990s. And
Andrea, we're getting a little feedback.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is that better? A little bit better now? How about now? Still feedback. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Still a little bit of feedback, but I'll keep going. So just to reiterate, you will find your expenses and your revenues in your 990 as a nonprofit organization. If you are an individual artist, you will not need to provide a budget snapshot. This is just for organizations.
Okay, thank you. And so we're looking at the 990. If we're individual artists, we do not need to complete that section. So will that be, when I go into the grant portal, there's a different view for individual artists versus nonprofit, correct? So they'll see a little bit different things. Okay. Okay, we did
That's
have a,
right. So when you load into the grant portal, you will first click to your funding opportunity, and then from there, it will ask you one of two questions. Click the artist or click the individual. And from there, or sorry, the individual or the organization. And then from there, it will prompt you on the direct path based upon the type of applicant you are.
and we do have a question about the LOI versus the grant application. So yes, you do need to submit that letter of intent by February 17th, like David mentioned. This is a simple Google form. Kind of, you want to think about it as a rough draft almost for your grant application. So if you go to our grant guidelines PDF, you will see that we have provided in the second half of that document the actual LOI questions and then the grant application questions. So you can see that there is going to be some difference. The grant application is going to get more into those details. So you will submit your LOI, your rough draft, your general overview of your project information by the 17th. We will receive it, review it, make sure everything is on track, make sure if you're a nonprofit, you have all the correct documentation. I will then send you an email. So you will receive an email from me, Whitney at kdacreativecorps.org. And then you will be receiving an additional email. And David, can you speak on what they will be receiving as far as the grant application confidential credentials, just so they have a clear understanding of the difference between those two?
I sure can. In fact, I set up an extra email account just to demo that and skipped over it. Let me do that real quick. So give me a second to share a screen again, and I'll take you through that process. Okay, I'm going to go back into the Smart Simple page here, but I'm going to log out. So up in the upper right-hand corner is information about my account. I can log out of this account, and I'm going to come back in with a new one called Demo at KDA Creative Org. Excuse me, I'm going to hit the register button. Pardon me. So new to the system, register. This will be the first step. And this allows me to register as an organization or an individual. I'm going to do organization because I want to show one element here that's a little different than if you go in as an individual. So I can fill out all of my personal information here, but this organization name, let's say I'm going to come in as Active Bakersfield Alliance. And it says it's incorrect. Well, that's unfortunate. One of the things it's looking for is this CAPTCHA down here. So, well, if I were to fix the CAPTCHA, well, then of course, I think I should be able to add this information. And it says no records found. And it's a little curious because what it's wanting you to do is if there's not another organization already submitted in the system, for instance, if I type one character here, if I type an E, I see Bakersfield Music Lessons, Dolores Huerta Foundation. Here are showing some submissions that have already been put into the portal. If your organization is not in the portal yet, then you're going to have to add a new organization. And so this is a first step. So before you even get to putting in your own information, you'll start with this. So I'm going to try and do this further quickly. Oops, that sign there. Checking my phone numbers, trying to go super fast here. So 555. And now I've successfully completed a registration. Unfortunately, I used bob@bob.com and not my demo there as I was speeding through it. But what would happen is I would be receiving an email that would look something like, find it. Like this.
Grant application portal. Again, make sure that you have submitted that LOI, we've received the feedback, and we will be reaching out via email to provide you with those next steps. Okay, everybody? So step 1, LOI. Step 2, receive the emails from us with those credentials so that you can go ahead and go into the grant application portal. We did have a question about the focus areas. Andrea, if you're available to speak on the focus areas quickly, and if one focus area is required or if we must meet all 4 focus areas.
I apologize, Whitney. Can you repeat that one more time?
Sure. If I'm applying, do I have to focus on all 4 of the subcategory 4 focus areas, or can I only pick one area to focus on?
Whitney, can you repeat that for me one more time?
Can you hear me?
Whitney, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Can't hear her.
Can you hear me?
I apologize, Whitney. For some reason, I'm not hearing your question. Thanks, Janae. You can hear Whitney, but I cannot. Maybe we need to turn up the audio on one of our devices in the room just a tad. For here.
So while they're figuring that out, if you can hear me, I'll go ahead and answer that question. That no, you do not need to do a project that contains all 4 focus areas. You only have to select one of those 4 focus areas. Might there be an overlap in one or more focus areas? Certainly, and that would be welcomed, but not a requirement for the grant application purposes.
Thanks, Whitney. I think we will wrap up the questions for now, and we'll go ahead and hop into my component, but please let those questions keep coming through. We love answering all the questions you might have about this program. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. We're going to hop into my presentation. Great. Can everybody see that okay? Perfect. Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, I am Andrea. It's an absolute delight to be with you all today. I'm the Executive Director of Kern Dance Alliance and the Program Director for the KDA Creative Corps. I am a grant writer and have been writing grants in the arts for nearly 2 decades. So I'm really excited to lead you through this process, but in full disclosure, I have found it really difficult to put nearly 20 years of grant writing experience into a 1-hour presentation. As I was developing today's presentation, I was intentional about creating an experience that was worthy of your time that we're sharing together today. Whether you are a veteran grant writer or you are writing for the very first time, my goal is that you find your personal takeaway to strengthen your skills that will ultimately help you to win your next grant application. Today's experience will sort of have a podcast feel to it. So if you are tuning in by your phone, not a worry. There will be some graphics and some videos and some text shown in a visual manner. But today is just about some free form speaking on my behalf, hoping to give you some nuggets of information to make you more successful in this process. Also, I want to note that we do have Alex, our ASL translator, in the room if you need additional services. This podcast will be recorded and loaded later on our website with Spanish subtitles. So to get started, I would like to share with you a video that I believe captures the reason why many of you are here today. I want to encourage you as we move through this process to think boldly and passionately and persuasively, and most important, effectively about your work and your writing. One moment, everybody. I just want to make sure I got the audio on because I know that we've been having some audio difficulties. Give me one moment. And here we go. Okay, and now we're back. So that was a really fun video. We're going to talk about those takeaways a little bit later in this segment, but for now, let's jump right into what we're going to be doing this morning. So this is a crash course, as I mentioned. I'm trying to take 20 years of grant writing knowledge and put it into a 1-hour presentation. And I thought these next tidbits are going to be really helpful to get you along your way. First, we're going to talk about the reality check. Number 2, we're going to dream big and then write it down. Number 3, we're going to get organized. Number 4, we're going to put pen to paper or finger to key. Number 5, we're going to be persuasive. After number 5, we're going to take a little intermission, a little bit of a stretch break. We'll bring Whitney back into the room. We'll moderate a couple more of your questions, and then we'll hop back down to number 6, the data dance. Number 7, money, money, money. Number 8, measure it. Number 9, review it. Number 10, submit it. From there, we're going to hop on over to going through those specific questions in the grant guidelines, and we're going to glean some of that information that we talked about in steps 1 through 10 and how they're going to be applicable to your grant proposals. And at the very end, I'm going to also provide some examples of KDA programs to give you a little more insight about how a program can be built based upon steps 1 through 10. And then we'll get to the grand finale, which is your turn to get in there and get moving. So let's hop on over to number 1, the reality check. You are human. Surprise, surprise. So these are the unspoken understandings of grant writing. Preparing a grant can be scary at the beginning. Putting yourself and your passion out there to be adjudicated by others can make anyone shaky in the knees. But if you have a reality check and you face your fears, then this process becomes less scary, I promise. Grant writing can be stressful, but it's okay. You can handle it. You win some and you lose some, and that's the nature of grant writing. I can't tell you how many I've lost, but when you win the big one, it sure does taste sweet. If you are feeling like an imposter, that is completely normal. No one knows everything, but your goal as a grant writer is to show your reviewer that you are an expert. Preparing grant proposals set up all new horizons from new challenges and unknown territories, and you may think to yourself, if I get funded, will I really be able to accomplish all of this? The answer is yes, and you will quickly move from imposter to doer. Grant writing is work, but it's an incredibly creative process. You'll be dedicated to writing, reviewing, writing, reviewing, and doing it all over again. It can be challenging to challenge yourself, but if you are an artist or a creative thinker, you'll recognize this process immediately. Da Vinci's Mona Lisa wasn't created in a day, and neither will your grant. But in the end, it will be a masterpiece and something you can be proud of. The good news is, and the silver lining, is that you'll learn the first time how to write a grant, and then you simply do it over and over and over again, but more refined. Great. So now that we've gotten through that reality check, we could all exhale and we can go ahead and move on to number 2. Dream big and then write it down. What is your big idea? What have you been dreaming about, and how can the Creative Core or another funding opportunity potentially turn your dream into reality? If you are looking for a source of inspiration for your Creative Core project, I encourage you to watch your local news and pay attention to the stories. The Creative Core is meant to improve the quality of life for people living in California through the arts. And for the creative thinkers in the room, you are the ultimate problem solvers. I imagine you could find a solution via the arts to a number of dismal stories impacting your community. Your local media can serve as a source of inspiration in a big way. So here's your chance. Write it down and make it happen. Studies show that when you write down your dreams, then they're often achieved. Maybe not immediately, but in due time. If I can, I'd love to share that. In 2017, I wrote about KDA's 5-year goals. I indicated that KDA sought to become a premier arts and culture organization that serves not only Kern County, but also serves the Central Valleys of California by providing a network of information, access to programs, and financial services that nurture and strengthen our community through the arts. Now, I don't have a magic ball and I am not a fortune teller, but truth be told, I wrote that 5 years ago, and 5 years later, it became true through the KDA Creative Core. Write it down. This is your chance. Let's make it happen. Number 3, time to get organized. This is where you develop your process mindset, where you go through the steps to get to the finish line. Remember, if your steps are not clearly defined, you can get off track really quickly. Step 1, read the funding guidelines. If you have not done so already, download and print the guidelines off the homepage of the KDA Creative Core website. Grab your highlighter and your favorite pen or your pencil and start making notes. Those notes ultimately become your plan. And don't just read them once, read them several times and then ask your colleague to read them too. I know they're 20 pages long, but they're 20 pages long for a reason. Step 2, check all of the boxes. Do you meet the eligibility as an individual or as an organization? Does your project fit one of the 4 focus areas, at least one? Does your project serve the lowest quartile on the Healthy Places Index? Are you working with artists to carry out your project? Did you check yes to all of those boxes? Then let's proceed. Step 3, strategize your timeline. What are your key dates and deadlines? I encourage you to start from the finish line and work backwards. If you can see the finish line, then you can see the steps ahead that you need to take to get there. The Creative Core is a cycle between May 1 of 2023 through May 1 of 2024, with quarterly financial reports, an interim report, and a final report. Your job is to start to fill in your timeline based upon your vision of your project, month to month, week to week, and even day to day. This will become clear as you work to drill down and identify the ins and the outs of your project. And with respect to the submission of the grant application, don't wait until the last minute, especially when it comes to those attachments. Individuals need to provide a letter of recommendation. All applicants need to provide artistic work samples, amongst other items. Don't let this be an afterthought. Think about them now so that you can craft your most competitive application. Step 4, the final step here in getting organized, become a project manager. Identify your team. Now, maybe it's outside of your comfort zone to become a project manager, but I encourage you to surround yourself with people that excel in areas you may not be as strong in. I purposely surround myself with those I know execute skills way better than I do. Not good at math? Find a mathematician. Not good at grammar? Find an English major. Not good at technology? Find a technician. Thank you, David. Not good at grant writing? Find yourself a grant writer. And yes, you can pay all of these people if you are funded through your grant. And on the note of being a grant writer, I know many of you are working alone, and that's okay. I do it as well. But I encourage you now to find a reviewer, someone with an unbiased opinion that understands your timeline and can provide you with valid feedback. Once you've made it through all 4 of these steps, then you can start to execute your work plan. Step 4, or number 4, I should say, pen to paper or finger to key. You're dreaming big, you're getting organized, and now it's time for you to hop into your word processing software or get out your scratch paper and start bringing clarity to your ideas. So let's start with the 5 W's and the 1 H. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. I know, it was like we're back in 2nd grade learning sentence structure. And I know it sounds so basic, but the basic foundation set the stage for the finite details. Some questions you want to be asking yourself. Who are you serving? Who is involved in your project? What is the project? What's it going to cost? What does the project solve? When does the project take place? Where does the project take place? Why does it matter? And how are you going to do it? Once you have an understanding of your 5 W's and your 1 H, you can begin your true writing process. Step 1 is the outline. Now that you've answered your basic questions, you can craft an outline to hash out more details based upon your 5 W's and your 1 H. For example, maybe when answering the question, who are you serving, you indicated people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Awesome, that is a great start, but there are so many more questions to answer. Are they children? Are they adults? Are they both? Where do they live? Rural or urban areas? What are their demographic features, such as race or gender? Do they live in the lowest quartile of the HPI? Your task is to discover as much as you possibly can about your 5 W's and your 1 H, so your reviewer is crystal clear when reading your application. Drilling down in an outline form will also ultimately help you to create your SOW, or your scope of work, as well as your project timeline. A project has a clear beginning, middle, and end. And remember, it's one project at a time. Stay clear of ideas that might complicate your vision and focus on the task at hand. Break your project down step by step so there are no questions about your execution. Step 2 is that first draft. It's time to go on over to the grant guidelines, copy and then paste them all into your word processing software and let the games begin. This is messy work. Don't be a perfectionist. It's okay. Let your stream of thought flow. Your best ideas flow when creativity is unhinged. Get it out all on paper. You'll edit it later. Step 3. The 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 19th draft, it's all part of the process. It's time for you to write and review and write and review and rinse and repeat. It can be daunting, but this process is making you a stronger writer and ultimately a stronger communicator verbally. This is where you are beginning to meet those word limits. You're using clearer language and editing to the point where you are using fewer words to make your point. Don't write so much. Here's a rule of thumb. 15 words per sentence. So now we've come to step 5, and that is being persuasive. Your project is worthy, but so is someone else's. You are writing to emotionally move your reader. You're going to pull at their heartstrings so they can emotionally connect with your project. You want your application to be memorable. Don't just explain what you are doing, tell them why. Be clear on the why the work matters. Infusing the why the work matters in your grant applications will make a huge difference in how the funders read and remember your applications. So that moves quick. We're already at our, halfway point. We're going to take a moment for a little stretch if you need it, a little quick intermission. We'll bring Whitney back into the room and we will go ahead and field some more of your questions.
How about now? Can you hear me? Okay. Great. I'm getting a nod. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at some more of your questions. We've had so many good questions. A couple of questions, Andrea, go back to the individual artist and applying for multiple grant applications. So if I am an individual artist, can I submit an individual artist application for myself? And I'm also part of an organization. Can that organization also submit an application if I'm part of that grant as well?
How's my audio? You getting any feedback? Great. Thank you, Whitney. So to answer that question, one project per artist or artists. So if you are an individual artist and you are applying for the brain dance, awesome, go for it. However, if you are an organization and you are intending to hire that artist and also apply for the brain dance, that is not eligible. However, if you are an organization and you are applying for the brain dance with that same artist, cool, go for it. However, that artist has to apply for a completely different application. So what I'm trying to say is there is no double dipping in terms of applying for multiple same projects. However, you can apply for multiple different projects and use some of the same artists.
Great. I think that was clear. And next question is going to be about the details in the grant application versus the LOI. So maybe I'm someone who is holding off on submitting my LOI because I want to be as detailed as possible. Do I have to be as detailed in the LOI, or can this be more of a draft? And then it might change and it might grow in different ways as I'm completing the actual grant application.
Thanks, Whitney. The LOI is meant to be a little looser. Now, you cannot completely change course between the LOI and the grant application, but we recognize that the LOI is still your time where you're finessing your ideas. The grant application will be the full scope of the project. So do your best in the LOI to let us know what you're planning to do. And what we are actually doing is we're fielding those LOIs and we're looking through them and we're coming back to you and we're giving you some feedback because we really want your grant applications to be as successful as possible. So yes, the answer is in your LOI, it can be loose, it can be a little more of a draft, but we want to encourage you to be as clear as you possibly can, but also understanding when you get to the grant application, it will be fully understood.
And just to touch on that time frame, I know we've had a couple of questions saying, hey, how long is it going to take to receive those grant portal credentials after I submit my LOI? And kind of to Andrea's point there, a little bit longer than you might expect. It's not an automated process. So we definitely receive your LOI, we review all of the material, and we want to make sure that we are setting you on the right course to continue on to the grant application. So if there is a question that we have or an area where we need more detail or clarification, we're going to go ahead and let you know that in our response to your LOI submission before you even receive the grant application credentials. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to resubmit your LOI, just things that we want you to be looking at, and so you can get clarification for yourself when you go in to answer those questions for your grant application. So hopefully you hear back from us in 48 hours, but if we do have questions and we need to consult with other members of our team, it might take a little bit longer than that. So we appreciate your patience, and as the LOIs flood in, we will work as quickly as possible to get you into those next steps. We did have,
if I can
yes.
just jump off of that on the deadline. please don't wait until February 16th at 11:59 p.m. We are small, but we are mighty, and we want to move as fast as we can. But if we have 60 LOIs come in one day, that will take some time for us to shift and sift through everything. So you are encouraged, get those in as soon as you possibly can so we can give you some proper feedback.
Yes, that's a great point. Don't wait till the deadline. We have a couple questions about the letters of recommendation that you had mentioned for individual artists, Andrea. So who should those come from if I'm applying as an individual artist, and where do those get submitted?
So you are encouraged to request letters of recommendations from employers or colleagues, anybody that can speak to your artistry and the work that you have done in your past. It's just a one-page letter, propping you up, giving you snaps, and acknowledging your success as an artist. And whether you are early in your arts career or you are a veteran artist, we're just looking for somebody to substantiate that you are a validated artist and that you're doing good work. Now, in response to where that LOI is going to be loaded, that will be in the the letter of recommendation, that will be loaded in the official grant portal. So when you go in to register, you're going to register as an individual, and the individual application will prompt you to upload your letter of recommendation.
Great. And we have a couple of questions about the presentation you just gave. So will people who registered have access to view the PowerPoint? They really thought those who, what, when, where, whys were very helpful, and they would like to be able to see it without having to pause a recorded webinar at a later time.
I'm looking at my IT director. He is shaking his head. So absolutely, we are happy to make the PowerPoint available to you beyond the webinar. So Whitney, maybe one more question and then we'll hop back into my presentation.
Great. Quick couple of questions actually just one question for David. What type of long password are we to do for that portal registration? Will it prompt them with some details about the requirements of the password? How should they be expecting to complete that?
Yes, I do believe Smart Simple, the platform that you're going to be in for the grants portal, will give you some clarification on complexity. Typically, an uppercase character, a lowercase character, a number, and a special character, an exclamation point, a pound, or an asterisk. And 8 characters is typically the minimum. I believe that's what it is for Smart Simple. In my IT life, when I'm talking to people about passwords, I always preach length beats complexity. Don't worry about coming up with all the characters. Do whatever the company that you're registering for requires, but really try and come up with something that's memorable, that's long, less words, more phrases. So instead of thinking about the word password, you could think about the word passphrase, a song lyric, line of poetry. The longer that password is, the less potential it can be hacked using modern password hacking and cracking tools. So there's my short answer on, or long answer on passwords.
Thanks so much, David. Hey, everybody, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Perfect. All right, so now we're going to hop back into my presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen. All right. Hey, everybody can see this okay, I hope. Oh, great, thank you. Okay, where am I? I got to move backwards in my presentation. There we go. All right, so we just wrapped up our intermission and we're going to head on down to number 6, the data dance. All right, so we took a break after 5. We were talking about being persuasive, but number 6, the data dance, continues that persuasive conversation. I call it the data dance for a reason, because you are constantly moving from one number to the next and the steps are always changing. You might consult one data house like the US Census and then seek similar information from another data house. And then all of a sudden you have to figure out what it all means by diving deeper into your data that you're trying to seek. It's a fun dance that definitely keeps you on your toes, but I am here to tell you, data helps you to tell your story. Use it. Data makes your narrative easier to write. It builds a stronger case. It adds credibility and persuasiveness, and it establishes urgency within your application. Enter the California Healthy Places Index, stage left. Well, it's on my left. I think it's on your left as well. If you were not in our webinar on Tuesday, we had Helen Dowling from the HPI giving a really fantastic overview of how to use the HPI to your advantage. The HPI is your data house for the California Creative Core project. If, like I said, if you did not access or you were not there on Tuesday, that webinar is available on the KDA Creative Core resource page right now, and it's on demand. Head on over there and watch Helen present about the Healthy Places Index. It is a fantastic tool. It's going to give you a lot of information about what your communities, your neighborhoods are facing. And that's your chance to dive deep into that data and to develop even more clarity about the projects that you're expecting to execute. All right, this is the big one. Money, money, money. I think that's why most of you are here. So you have been busy writing your narrative, you're fine-tuning your message, and you're developing your persuasive applications. Now it's time to turn on over to the numbers. The KDA Creative Core has budget requirements. Organizations can request up to $300,000. Individuals can request up to $150,000, and there must be an 80-20 split. Remember, the KDA Creative Core is a jobs creator for artists. The 80% reflects the artist's salary that they potentially would be paid for an entire year's worth of work. The 20% is used to implement and execute your project. For example, if an organization asks for $300,000, then they can pay an artist or artists up to $240,000, and then they can spend $60,000 on administrative costs and costs associated with program design and implementation. If an individual is requesting $150,000, they can pay an artist or artists up to $120,000 and then spend $30,000 on administrative costs and costs associated with program design and implementation. Now, because you have diligently created your scope of work and you are likely clear on the expenses associated with your project, it's time to dive deep. How many people will get paid? How many paintbrushes will you need? Will gas and mileage need to be covered? How much will you spend on printing flyers? Will you need an extra insurance policy for the year? Will you need to pay a CPA to prepare your taxes? Ask yourself all of the questions so you can develop a strong itemized budget. Expenses can include a lot of things like program supplies, marketing materials, rentals, insurance, and admin costs. However, there is a whole list of things that you cannot fund with the Creative Core money. For example, you cannot request funding for projects with religious purpose. You cannot request funding for construction projects, a purchase of land or a building. You cannot purchase equipment, but you can rent equipment. You can't pay for out-of-state travel, and you cannot pay projects or artists that live outside of California. I want to draw your attention to this awesome document of what we do not fund. It's directly linked in the grant guidelines. Hop on over there and read through all of those bullet points, because you don't want to get to the finish line and then realize that you have an element of your budget that is off limits. Read through it now and start to really craft your proposal.
I also included the link in the chat for everyone to have a quick reference guide.
I'm sorry, Whitney, I saw you hop on and then I saw you hop off, but I did not hear what you said. Oh, she gave me a thumbs up. Okay, we're good. We're good. Okay. All right. Moving on down the list. Oh, I have a tip for you. Here's my tip. We're finishing up the money, money, money segment. If you have described a person or a thing in your narrative and you have indicated it will have a cost, it must show up in your budget. For example, if you state in your narrative that you will pay a musician and a poet for your project, and you only list the musician in your budget, that's going to be a red flag for your reviewer. Make sure that you link anything that you say in your narrative directly into your budget if it's going to have a cost. Okay. Okay, time to measure it. Item number 8. Okay, so all KDA Creative Core projects must be measured. And I understand this can sound a little bit scary, but I'm here to tell you it will be okay. We are here to help you. So have you heard of these words? Goals, impacts, outcomes, qualitative, quantitative. They are synonymous with grant writing. And all they are meant to do is give you tools to ensure that your program is impactful. No wishful thinking. These tools allow you to measure whether or not your program was successful at doing what you said it would do. This is important because at the KDA Creative Core, we will report to the state at the end of 2024 the data surrounding your projects. Ideally, we will have such great success that when the state reports to the governor's office about how well we executed the Creative Core, mind you, this is a pilot program. It's never happened before, ever. He will be so incentivized by the success of these projects that he's going to approve the program again. And we want that money to keep coming into the Central Valleys, right? So please get out there and do the best job you can so that we can keep advocating for historic moments like this and in funding for the arts in the Central Valleys. So here we go. Let's define some of these words and let's use an example, one of the program focus areas as an example. And let's just say you're going to choose water conservation. Goals. Goals are what your project intends to do. For example, I've chosen water conservation. My goal is to educate about water conservation. Outcome. This is what you anticipate are the short-term effects of your project. For example, I'm going to intend for people to be mindful of how they conserve water in the short term. Impacts. These are what you anticipate to be the long-term effects of your project. For example, through my project, I expect for public policy to be adopted to ensure greater water storage capacity for all people living in California. That is my long-term impact. Qualitative. This is subjective data that measures your project. For example, you might interview participants that attend your project or your program before and after the event to gauge their understanding of water conservation. Likely, if you've done the job well, their pre-interview will differ greatly from their post-interview. Similarly, quantitative is your objective data that measures your project. For example, you might ask participants to participate in a Likert scale that provides numerical data, and they're going to participate in that evaluation pre-event and post-event to measure their understanding of ways to conserve water. Again, another opportunity where you can gauge what they know before they get there, and then after they attend your event, you can gauge what they learned. Some successful tools or some tools that you can use to measure your qualitative and quantitative data: surveys, numerical ratings, Likert scales, written or spoken testimonials, Q&As, roundtable discussions, journaling, video assessments. These are all tools that you can use to measure your project. And the truth is, depending upon the type of project you are executing will determine the type of tools you will need for assessment. I encourage you to have a variety of tools. Qualitative and quantitative are recommended to express the fullest assessment of your project. And I also want to draw your attention to pages 12 and 13 of the grant guidelines, where we already spell out the data for you that we're expecting to collect from your projects. Much of the data is numerical. However, when it comes to qualitative data, like measuring the shift and readiness of community members, that's up to you to determine what the shift is and how you will measure it using a variety of tools. Dropping down to number 9, it's time to review it. So you've done it, you've crossed the finish line, and you're anxiously awaiting for that moment to press submit. But hold on, not so fast. It's time to review. I encourage you to find that independent reviewer, someone that can be non-biased and unfamiliar with your project. This may be the moment where your palms get really sweaty because for the first time, someone else is reviewing your work. but relish in the opportunity to respond to constructive criticism. After all, I guarantee your reviewer wants you to win too. Also, I want to recommend using a shared word processing application or software like a Google Doc, where you can not only collaborate with others, but you can also track your edits and your changes and allow suggestions to be made. You're going to want to go through several back and forth review and edit periods until you are satisfied with your efforts. And now we've arrived. It's time to submit. You're done with your review period, your budget, your attachments, your work samples are solid. You've crossed every T and dotted every I. It's now time to say goodbye to that precious application you've been growing for what feels like years, but really it's just been a few weeks. Your finger is on that submit button and your anxiety is all high. You're thinking to yourself, did I answer everything? Did I offer my best samples? Did I do my math correctly? And the answer is yes. You have been intentional and thoughtful about your process. Your project has been crafted with love and it's ready to grow wings and fly. It's time to press submit. Now go run around the block, partake in some deep breathing methods, or go have a toast. Release all of that energy and know that you did a job well done. It's a waiting game at this point, and may your application win. So that's everything from steps 1 through 10. And now I'm going to hop in. I got to check on my time real quick. Okay, we're doing okay. We're going to hop on down now into the grant guidelines, writing them and using steps 1 through 10 and how they can be applicable to you as you get in there and start writing your own. So the first thing that you're going to discover when you get into either the grant guidelines into your grant portal is your project description. In 175 words or less, tell us your project description. Do y'all remember that video that we watched at the top of today's segment? Those first 3 sentences should connect with your reviewer immediately. Remember, they have a stack of proposals. Your project has to stand out. Evoke emotion, create credibility, and inspire action. If you're able to do those 3 items in that 175-word description of your project, then you're off to a great start. Program design and implementation. This is where you're going to check the boxes of 1 or more of the focus areas that your project will serve. Public health awareness and messages to stop the spread of COVID-19, public awareness related to water and energy conservation, climate mitigation, and emergency preparation, relief, and recovery, civic engagement, including election participation. 2024 is an election year if you're thinking forward, and 4, social justice and community engagement. Click 1 or several of those if your project is going to fit in one of those zones. And furthermore, then you're going to click the artistic discipline that's going to be highlighted in your project. You don't have to just choose one. You can choose several artistic disciplines, and there is a spot for other. If there's something that maybe we missed, please inform us and tell us what your artistry is. The program description. Okay, this is where you put your 5 W's and your 1 H all into action in 1,000 words. Be specific and explain your project thoroughly. You'll have a chance also in this section to list your full timeline, and that's your chance to explain your project in a logistical way. Those are 2 different question boxes. Use them to the fullest extent. Use all 1,000 words to be as clear and to the point as you possibly can. If you can wrap it up in 600 words, even better. Remember, your reviewers have a stack of proposals. Moving down to the community and engagement and social impact section. This is the section where you will focus heavily on your who, your how, and your where. Define who, where, and how many you will serve, and how you will engage and impact those living in the lowest quartile of the Healthy Places Index. And I should mention, I'm going to drop down here in a little bit, and I'm going to be sharing some examples of current KDA programs to help you understand these even deeper. The program budget, remember that 80-20 split and be explicit about your expenses. Ensure that your narrative is being reflected in your budget, and don't forget to review that what we do not fund document. Program evaluations, metrics, and outcomes. Time to define the ways in which you will measure the success of your project. Those keywords are goals, impacts, outcomes, qualitative, quantitative, and the tools you will use to measure and ultimately assess your data. Remember, we've already spelled out for you the data that we're looking to collect. Your job is to define your goals, your metrics, and your outcomes to be aligned with the KDA Creative Core outcomes. Program personnel. This is all about the who. You're going to be writing short biographies for every single person involved in your project. They might be artists. They might be part of your administrative team. They might even be part of your technical team. But remember to list all of them, very, very short bios about each of them. You have 2,000 words to fill in this information. I also want to encourage you that you need to notate whether or not these individuals will be paid by the KDA Creative Core grant. So some of you might have projects that actually are costing more than what the Creative Core is allocating. Maybe you are an organization and you're looking at a $500,000 project and you're hoping $300,000 is going to come from the core. Well, there's a possibility that that extra $200,000 is going to pay other people that are part of this project. Maybe you already have committed funders that are going to be a part of your project. Make sure you notate so that your reviewer is crystal clear as to whether or not Creative Core funds will fund these people or outside funds will fund those people. Maybe they're already built into your budget as an organization. Be clear about who's getting funded, how and where and why. Additionally, this is your chance to shine a spotlight on your artists you're working with. Sing their praises and show your reviewer the important role they're going to play in your project. After all, it is imperative that you show how artists are involved from the beginning to the middle and the end of your core project. Work samples, okay, you only get 3. That's all you get. But the good news is there's all sorts of media files that are available for you to upload. David walked us through those earlier when he was navigating the grant portal for you. But I want to encourage you to read those grant guidelines carefully so that you're really clear how to create successful uploads. And here's a tip. The file names of your uploads, please make them easily recognizable. For example, Picture Playhouse 2023 season brochure.pdf versus 34 VHDJS, all the letters and the numbers and the characters.pdf. Remember, your reviewer has a stack of proposals. Even let your file names be memorable and clear. And furthermore, use your work sample notes section. Tell the reviewer about what they're analyzing. The more details, the better. So that is information about the grant guidelines and how you can use sections 1 through 10 to answer those. I hope I made them a little bit more clear. I think what we'll do real fast, Whitney, is why don't we take 5 minutes for a couple more questions, and then we'll load in a couple of KDA program examples, and then we'll get to the grand finale, and then we'll say goodbye.
Great. That sounds good. We do have a lot of really good questions. I want to start with kind of clarifying for everybody, individual artists and the different grants, as we kind of mentioned before. So if I work in collaboration with a team of producers, camera, sound, does this still qualify me as an individual if I have other people that I'm hiring to fulfill my project?
Do you anticipate the filmmaker, the sound engineer, the other members of the team to be paid through the grant? If that question is yes, then you do need to indicate the role they're playing. Are they an artist? Are they admin? Or are they in the technical arena? So it's up to you to define the roles that those people are playing in your project. If you are an individual artist, you're maybe paying yourself 80% of your ask. You can divide, if you're generous, you can divide that amongst 3 other applicants. So maybe 40% goes to you, 40% goes to another artist. Again, it's a jobs creator, and you're going to have to indicate in your data how many arts jobs were created through your project.
Great. And so just to clarify, I can still apply as Whitney, the individual artist. And in my application, I will state, I am also collaborating with a filmmaker, with a photographer, and with a sound technician, correct?
You're absolutely correct. That is perfect. But just make sure your filmmaker and your cinematographer aren't also submitting applications for the same project.
So one person should apply as the main point of the project, the head of the project, and then the other individuals could fall under that instead of two individuals applying
Absolutely.
together.
Yes. And I can tell you, we're going to be cross-checking all of these. If we are seeing similar applications coming through, it's going to have to get thrown out, unfortunately. Don't make us do that. We're really nice people. And similarly, if you know, the United Way of Merced also received 4.2. So we are kind of, but not really sharing 14 counties. The United Way of Merced is contracted to serve 3 counties in the northern area of the Central Valleys. KDA is serving 14. But I can tell you, if you live in one of those counties that Merced is serving, and you're thinking about also applying to the KDA Creative Corps, I can tell you there will be only one application funded. You cannot receive a grant from the KDA Corps and also the United Way of Merced. We will be cross-checking with our team up in Merced.
And if I am an individual artist applying for a grant, can I also be a partner artist for a nonprofit organization who is applying for a different project?
Absolutely. I mean, if you're an incredible artist and everybody wants to use you, great. I love that idea. Yes, you can absolutely apply on behalf of your own project as an individual. You can also be rolled into an organization's project. Keyword, they have to be separate projects.
And do I have to know who the partnering artists are specifically? I know you mentioned like giving a brief little bio about each of those partner artists. So I have to have those identified individuals as part of my grant application. It can't be a, hey, I'm going to audition people once I receive this funding.
I'm going to want to encourage you to be as finite in your process as possible, only because this is an absolutely competitive grant process. And if I'm a reviewer and I may be looking at an application that's still trying to figure it out versus an application that is finite in every single detail of their process, I am not reviewing the applications, but I'm just trying to put myself in an adjudicator role. How might that stack up in their mind? They don't know who you are. It's an anonymous process. So I'm not going to say yes or no. I'm just going to encourage you to create the most competitive application you possibly can do.
And follow-up question to that. So we talked about program personnel. Is there a program personnel section of the application for individual artists as well as nonprofit organizations? Or in what section of the application would they indicate those partner artists?
The program personnel is the exact location where you will indicate all of the individuals that you are working with. However, when you're talking about yourself, that is when you go through your registration process in the grant portal. So an individual will fill out their personal profile and an organization will fill out their organization profile. And that's where you're going to give us all the details about you. Your individual letter of recommendation will be uploaded there. If you're an organization, your mission statement, all of your programs and services will be uploaded there. So your profiles essentially will then automatically populate into your grant application. So make sure you're being really serious about your organization or your personal profile, because your reviewer will see that information.
Okay, and we have a couple of questions about the budget when it comes to an individual artist applying and then having these partner artists. So a couple of questions. First, can you clarify that the 80% of the budget paying the artist would also go to pay those partner artists? And then I'll ask my second question.
Yes, 80% can be given to one or several artists. And so that is at your discretion about how you want to pay that 80% out. Once the 80% is paid to those artists, it's at their discretion what they choose to do with their funding.
And if my project is structured so that I'm going to provide stipends to individuals for creating let's say short films, then I don't necessarily know who those filmmakers are yet. There's going to be a participant application completed during the funding timeline, but we plan to work with many artists. How should I stipulate that in my grant application?
Well, number one, remember that they must be 18 or over. So funding cannot go to support any artists that are under 18, unfortunately. But in terms of kind of doing, sounds like kind of a call to filmmakers is kind of the process, or like giving stipends to students to create films. I think that you can craft your narrative to be as persuasive as possible based upon your understanding of your project. So while I know I said earlier, your reviewer is looking at all different types of applications, and they might lean more heavy on somebody that knows exactly who they're working with versus somebody that's going to kind of put out a call or give out funding to unknown individuals. But I think if you can craft that narrative to be absolutely persuasive, I think it can stand very strong against other applications that might have more details about the exact individuals they're working with.
Great, thank you. And we do have a couple of questions about service area. So if my organization serves counties across California, can I still apply for the KDA Creative Core grant if part of my project is serving a group within the KDA Creative Core service area?
Your project must serve one of the 14 counties of the Central Valley region. However, you can be an artist in the Bay Area or a nonprofit in Los Angeles who's creating a project that's going to serve the Central Valleys. So where you are as the project manager doesn't necessarily matter as long as you're in California. However, the project must serve one of those 14 counties in order to receive funding from the KDA Creative Core.
Great. And I have one more question about budget. Can you explain a little bit more about equipment versus supplies?
So I'm the first to tell you, I got dinged by the state in an application years ago because I wrote equipment into the application and not supplies. And they were gracious enough to let me redo my language. But yes, so there are certain, the California Arts Council is mandated by the state of California to not use taxpayer funding for certain things, and that includes equipment. And the reason equipment is not able to be purchased is because it loses its value over the years. So part of that said, supplies can be a different nomenclature, if you will, to describe equipment. But again, you can't go out and buy a laptop, but you can rent a laptop if you need to. You can't go out and buy a flat screen TV for your office, but maybe you need to rent a flat screen television for your final performance. So that would be one way of maybe kind of differentiating the difference between rentals and buying. And then when it comes to supplies can be so many things. Paper, canvases, point shoes. I mean, there are so many, supplies that you can purchase under the heading of supplies. I hope that helps.
It does. And so my follow-up question would be, what about the use of location? Can I take students out on a field trip somewhere? Will that be covered? Can I rent a space? Will that be covered? If I am doing something at a park and I need to pay the park a fee, is that something that would be covered under the grant funding?
Absolutely, you can have rentals all day long. Just don't buy a building, go buy some land. Those things are off limits, but you can absolutely have rentals all day long.
Great, thank you so much.
Well, at this point, I will go ahead and I will just share a couple of examples of KDA programs in the next 2 minutes, and then we're going to spend literally the last minute in like a flash writing situation if you'd like to partake. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm just going to share with you a couple of examples of KDA programs. So let me stop share, just make sure I've got my audio enabled, and it is great. Okay, So KDA has a variety of programs that we use movement and dance to really transform our community. We essentially are taking movement and dance beyond the stage and using it to improve the quality of life for people living in Kern County. One of those ways is our Books in Motion program. So Books in Motion is a program that uses movement and dance to encourage literacy in children kindergarten to third grade. And so here's my who, what, when, where, why, all the 5 W's and the H that I just kind of quickly answered to kind of give you an idea of where you might be heading with your projects. Who am I serving? Kern County children, grades K through third grade from urban and rural areas. Who's involved? I have artists involved. I have my partnering organizations involved. I also have my board and my staff involved. What's it called? Books in Motion. What's it going to cost? $25,000. What does it solve? Illiteracy in Kern County. When does the project take place? Summer, specifically June through August, although we're working all year round. I'm going to show you that in a minute. Where does the project take place? In Kern County libraries. Why does it matter? Because Kern County has some of the lowest illiteracy rates in the state of California, and because Kern County communities are rated as some of the lowest on the Healthy Places Index. How are you going to do it? A lot of information right there, but essentially what we're doing is we're making reading, which often feels intangible, tangible. They're taking movement and dance and they're creating the theme of a book in their bodies through kinesthetic learning. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of of Books in Motion. That's my 5 W's and my 1 H. From there, because I started to drill down deeper into my 5 W's and my 1 H, I was able to realize my timeline. Your timelines are likely going to look similar to this. It's very date specific. It tells who, it tells what, and it tells when. So for example, Books in Motion kicks off every year in March. From March until April, we do an open call to performers. Starting in April, we close those applications and we offer acceptance to those that apply to become the performers. You can kind of see how the dates roll out from there. Specifically, the actual program launches in July, and it runs July to June, August 1, with 30 performances happening at 22 libraries all across Kern County. But the project does not end when we close the books on that final performance. Now we're going in and we're looking at the data, we're evaluating everything that had come in, and we're getting ready to announce the success of the program when we announce our final reporting and our year-end review on December 31st. So there's kind of the nuts and bolts of what a timeline might look like, including yours when you go in and do your timeline. Here's the scope of work. Whoa, I know it's a lot, but I want to draw your attention. I hope you can see it because I know it's a lot, but I want to draw your attention to the headings. So at the top of the headings of the scope of work, you're going to see the objective, the activity, the person responsible, the timeline, and the project outcome. So I basically took from my 5 W's and my 1 H, I then started to load in my timeline, and from my timeline, I started to build my scope of work. And this is giving me really clear ins and outs of how my project will be executed. So then here's the masterpiece. Remember, I was telling you Da Vinci was not created, or Da Vinci's Mona Lisa wasn't created in one night. It takes a long time for these things to happen. And so I went from, 5 W's and 1 H to a 7-page document full of data and persuasive points and information about the details of the people involved. This is where you're going to get to if you aren't already there. Lots of writing, reviewing, and editing, and doing it all over again. But it's a great process, and I know for a fact you'll feel really proud when you get to the end. This is an example of assessments, so measuring a program. So we have Adaptive Dance. It's Kern County's only adaptive dance program for people 5 to 22, and it is consecutively ran, and it finishes with a final performance at the historic Bakersfield Fox Theater. And so here's where we're talking about the goals and the outcomes and the impacts. Goals are the things that you say your project is going to do. Your outcomes are your short-term effects, and your impacts are your long-term effects. You can kind of see our outcomes include demystifying and humanizing disability, enhancing a brightened effect, increasing quality of life. The program is so wonderful. We very much love it. But So here's what I'm doing. I'm using a series of tools that are quantitative and qualitative to measure the success of the program. We use numerical scales, we use interviews and Q&As and video assessments, and then we collect the data. And let me show you how we're collecting the data. The spreadsheet on the left side of your screen is how our interns rate the child week to week. And it's based upon a numerical scale. Did they come into the room with a 1 when it comes to determining their Brighton effect? How did they leave the room? Was it a 4? Was it a 5? So at the end of 6 weeks, we're able to look at this criteria and create data points based upon the trajectory of 3 weeks. And I know for the artists in the room, it's really difficult to measure creativity, but this is one, or just qualitative initiatives. This is one way we found to measure qualitative ideas quantitatively. And I'm happy to share this with you more if you have more questions about this. I know we're running out of time. This is a video I was going to share with you, but we're 3 minutes past and I want to respect your time. This is the Adapt Dance final wrap-up video. It has, all of the warm feels to it. And I think sometimes the best data is from the testimonials from the people involved in your project. I encourage you to get out there, get your video cameras, get your smartphones, and film the people experiencing your project. If you want to view this wonderful video, it's on the KDA website under Adapt Dance. Okay, so Whitney, do you think that we have time? Does anybody want to participate in our grand finale?
I think if people would like to stay on and participate in the grand finale, that can be optional. And for everybody else, if you have additional questions or you have a question that you put in that you don't feel was answered or answered it with enough clarity, I'm going to put in our general email address into the chat. It is bonjour@kdacreativecore.org. And you can email us there and we would be happy to assist you and answer any other questions that you have, as well as I know we had questions about providing the PowerPoint to you at the conclusion of the presentation, which we will work to get out to you along with the recorded version of the presentation as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Whitney. At this moment, we'll go ahead and conclude the actual webinar, but if you want to stick around and you want to do this lightning round with me, I promise to only hold you about maybe 3 more minutes. So thank you for those. We'll see y'all later. Hope to see you on Tuesday during the marketing and branding webinar. That's going to tell you a lot about communications and how to get your project out into the community. Please sign up if you have not done so already. So let's hop back over to the webinar, and I'm just going to prompt you through a lightning writing round. Okay, here we go. Oh, what's that? Okay, I'm good. I think we're okay. All right. So, all right, we have arrived. It's the grand finale. Often when we don't have time to think about it, our best thoughts happen. So here's your chance. I'm going to get out your paper and your pen or your device that your fingers can type really quickly on. We're about to jump into a lightning writing round. So I'm going to prompt you with those 5 W's and that 1 H. Your job is to let your thoughts just spill out on paper or on your device. And then the idea is at the end, you're going to take those notes with you and you're going to begin your journey of crafting your KDA Creative Core LOI or the grant application. Okay, are you ready? I'm going to prompt you. First, I want you to just write down your big idea. What is it? Couple of words. What are you thinking that you want to do? Write it out. All right, here we go. Lightning round. First thought that comes to your mind, write it down. Doesn't matter if you love it or hate it later. The fact is, you're just letting your creativity flow in an unhinged manner. Here it comes. Who? What? When? Where? Why? How? And that's it. It took just a couple moments of your time to get out some big ideas on paper. If you're writing on paper, grab your smartphone, take a picture of it so it doesn't get all, crinkled up and you can't read it later. Of course, if you're on your device, save it for later. But I hope this is igniting some ideas, most specifically, to use the arts to improve the quality of life for people living in California. It's been an honor to be with you this afternoon, or this morning, I should say. I want to acknowledge David, our IT director, that's been keeping us on track. Thank you for everything that you've done today. As Whitney said, reach out to us at bonjour@KDA Creative Core, and we look forward to seeing you on Tuesday. Special thank you to Alex, our moderator. Thank you so much. We'll see you all soon. Bye.